That piece is called Odds and Unevens. It's about 5 minutes long. I think it came out of a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine. I had some ideas floating around in my head, and then someone lamented there not being a lot of really quality lit that is under like 8 minutes long. Like if you want to put something in your program and you've only got 4 or 5 minutes left, you're either stuck with doing a movement of something that's longer or something that's sort of lower end on the difficulty spectrum, and so I sort of did it to fill that need, but then I ended up just really liking it a lot.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Olin Hannum. Hi, Olin.
Hello, Mark. How's it going?
Really well, Olin. So should we put the disclaimer in the beginning, or should we wait till you introduce yourself?
I am cool either way. We were just talking for like a half an hour, and we've like now readjusted to like recording.
I know. Sorry about that. I ambushed you a little bit.
No,
there.
It's fine.
So Olin is one of the hosts of the AMusEd podcast. That's AMusEd, AMusEd. And Olin is also a member of the Muted Podcast Network, one of my sister shows in our network. And so, but that's not all Olin does. He's not here because of that.
Indeed, although partially because of that, like that's certainly how we met. The AMusEd podcast is sort of a roundtable discussion. We, among the four of us, teach all levels and teach band, orchestra, and choir. And so it's sort of a music ed all around, like trying to help each other solve problems. It started out, we were all in our first 5 years of teaching. And so we were sort of like trying to collectively help each other get over that hump and have a healthy relationship with our, careers. But it has since changed into a network of actually like delving into ideas and trying to do the best that we can.
And your podcast wasn't the one that inspired me, but your example certainly was one of the inspirations for me to actually get off my butt and start this project 2.5 years ago. That's become
the network and whatnot. Yeah,
just your podcast. I mean, I listened to AMusEd before I ever did my own podcast, and I thought,
oh, no kidding. Yeah, that's great. I don't think I knew that. Yeah, we've been going. Oh gosh, I think we've been doing this for 5 years now, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to some composition podcasts and some just general music podcasts and entrepreneurial podcasts, but yours was the first music ed podcast I listened to. Okay,
gotcha. Well, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that worked out well. But yeah, I'm that's not all I do, I suppose. I'm also an educator. I'm the athletics bands director at Oregon State, associate director of bands. I run the marching band, all the athletics bands, which includes, the group that plays the soccer, the group that goes to the NCAA tournament. We did a swimming meet last year. We do all kinds of stuff, I mean, you know how it is in the athletic band world. You're kind of the face of things. In addition to that, I teach a couple of music courses in the music department, direct the Wind Symphony, which is the #2 audition concert band at the university.
Yeah. So, obviously you're not just the AMusEd podcast. You're, the associate director of bands at Oregon State is a big position. So we're going to come back and circle around to that. But Olin, can you tell everybody about your early days? Like, how did you get into music, and like, what do you play, and how did you kind of end up being a band director?
Yeah, so that's always the question. Anytime a student or someone at a conference asks what I play, I always ask them what they think I play. because it's telling to try to ask people what they think you play, because it reveals a bunch of people's assumptions about what a certain instrument player looks like, acts like, et cetera, and they all think I play tuba.
Really?
They all think I play tuba. I don't know what it is about me, like a larger happy fellow, I suppose. But no, so I grew up in Woodland, California, played in bands starting in the 4th grade. Teacher was Eleanor Bain, who's no longer around, but she was excellent. She started me on French horn. I didn't start on trumpet and then switch over. Didn't do any of that stuff. Played recorder for a half an hour before I decided I hated it. And then switched over to French horn, played French horn all the way up through high school. I switched districts in between middle school and high school. And so I lost a little bit of that translation because the district I switched to was a very high achieving music district. And so there was a certain assumption of the abilities of the students coming out of middle school that I did not meet at the time. But instead of that being sort of recognized and helped along, I think it was I sort of got lost in the shuffle there. So I wasn't like heavily involved or super good or anything in high school. That sort of stuff happened late high school, early college.
Tell me more about the high school thing. So how did you know you were going to be a music major? When did you know you wanted to make music your profession?
So, that would have been in the fall of my first year of college. I went to a school that didn't have music at all at it. I was going to be majoring in physics, and because I was always a big math person, and in high school, you had to take 2 sciences to graduate, and they offered chem, bio, and physics, and you had to take 2 years, and that was the whole thing. And I think the intent was that you took 2 of those 3, but I somehow graduated taking physics and AP physics as my only 2 sciences. And so I really wanted to do that. And then I got to college and realized how much my life revolved around performing in musical groups. So I decided I didn't want to go to a school that didn't have music at it. Dropped out, did the junior college thing for a couple of years, and then went to a school that did have music. And then I ended up majoring in music. I was a composition major through most of my undergrad, and then switched to performance like right at the last second.
So why did you make that switch from composition to performance?
So the real reason is because of money. This was in the University of California system in the mid 2000s. There were tuition raises every single term of about 30% for a few years there. And so it would have taken me 2 extra quarters to get through the composition degree, but I could do a recital and graduate with a performance degree like right now. And so I ended up doing it like that, which in hindsight, I kind of regret, but I ended up going into music directing and ed anyways, which is neither of those 2 things. So I'm not sure how much it mattered, if I'm being honest.
So Olin, after you got your degree in performance, you just mentioned a moment ago that you are you're obviously the band director at Oregon State, or one of the band directors at Oregon State. How did that happen? What was what was the link there?
So, I mean, it's just like anything else, right place, right time type of situation. Like anybody's career that has advanced to the point that they're really happy with it had some sort of confluence of being really good at something and having someone believe in you at the right time, and that's no different with my situation. After I graduated undergrad, one of my mentors in my undergrad, Dr. Tom Slabaugh, said, I asked him, was like, hey, so like, well, actually, no, he asked me, he's like, hey, so you're going to grad school, right? And I'm like, what? What do you mean? I'm going to go take I'm going to audition for gigs. And he goes, no, you're going to grad school. Let me call some people. Let me see where there's openings. And he ended up keying me up to a graduate teaching assistantship that was available for working with Dr. Chris Chapman, who Tom went to graduate school they were in their DMA programs together. And so I ended up studying with Chris, got my master's, and then right after that, I was applying for jobs. I got offered the band directing job at Yuba City High School. This is in 2010, something like that. Trying to make sure I get that right. Sorry. So I get offered this job at Yuba City High School, and so I call Tom, and I'm like, hey, Tom lives in Davis, and he's from Elk Grove, which is a Sacramento suburb for those out there. And Davis is right next to Sacramento. And I go, hey, so like I got offered this gig. Like, what do you know about this town? Like, what's the deal here? Like, I know sort of about Yuba City, but like, music ed in this area. Is this a good gig? Should I go for this? Do you think there's potential there? And he goes, they're hiring me an assistant over here, and you should do that instead. And I was like, oh, well, okay, cool. So I applied for that job. So I'm assistant director of athletics bands at Davis for about a year. Tom gets a different job, leaves. I end up getting the athletics bands director job with only a master's degree at Davis. I worked there for 6 years, and now I'm up at OSU.
Let me just kind of back up here. So you got your master's degree at Oregon State.
Correct.
You went back to be the assistant athletic band director at UC Davis, became the band director at UC Davis, and then went back to become the associate band director at Oregon State.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been one of those, like I said, just people believing in me at the right times, and I mean, it's worked out great. I feel like I'm getting pretty good at it. There were a few years there where I didn't think I was good at it at all, and I was just faking it the whole time.
Well, that's everybody at some point, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So, this is interesting because I had a similar conversation with Jason Nam, who's the third band director at Indiana.
Oh, sure.
He was on the show. I sat in his office and we talked about the same idea. So Jason finished his doctorate at IU and then was hired as one of the associate band directors at IU. And we talked about how that, to create an impression when you're a student where you can then be hired as a professional by the same people, that's actually kind of a special thing.
It is, yeah. And it was, I don't want to use the term heartwarming, but it really meant a lot to me that when the athletics band position at Oregon State came up, that like I asked, I was like, hey, do you think I should apply for this? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they were willing to, after like I got my master's with Dr. Chapman, who was still working here at the time. He recently got the job at Central Michigan and is headed out there to be director of bands. But the fact that after working with him, he felt confident in me to handle this really old, impressive, excellent program. It meant a lot to me.
So let's talk about Oregon State and what you're doing there specifically. So what does your job look like on a daily basis?
So it's wearing a lot of hats, which I mean we all do, right? But it depends on the day. There are days when I have 2 or 3 rehearsals in a day, each of which are 2 or 3 hours long. And like I have to plan for that and make sure that's all ready. And I get to campus at 9 a.m. and I leave at 10 p.m. And there's also days when I don't go to campus at all, where I stay home because I have to finish writing the drill for tomorrow's rehearsal. And so I just stay at home because I write stuff at home and sort of power through it. There's a lot more logistical and operational work that goes into a program like this than I think even I would have expected. Even making the jump from UCD to OSU was remarkably big on that front. Like the Davis band performs a lot more often, just like in number of performances, than the OSU band. But the scope of the program, ironically, and sort of this is in tension with that previous statement, is the scope of the program is a lot smaller over there. So like just jumping from FCS UC Davis up to Pac-12 Oregon State, I mean, not up to, but over to, if you will, suddenly like the Pac-12 network wants waivers for every student in band because they're going to be on television. Suddenly, like we can't host certain students like for band days and recruiting trips, because if they end up being a recruit for athletics, then that counts as one of their official visits. Like all these little things that you never would have anticipated. Also, it costs a lot more, weirdly, up here. Like we would take, when I was at Davis, we would take the band down to Cal Poly every year, because that was one of the only programs in our conference that was close by that had, you know, a comparably sized marching band. Like we would always go to Sac State, but that's right across the river. That's not very far away. We would always go down to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And that trip probably cost us, I don't know, $20,000, something like that, to bring, you know, 225 band students down there for a few days. We do a similar full band trip here, and it costs us like $90,000. And it is inexplicable to me how it is that much more expensive, just based on the extra travel distance, traveling between states, using bus companies that operate differently. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. So what's your staff look like? Are they mostly student? Do you have a professional staff or just student staff?
So we have a professional staff. Actually, athletics this year has agreed to, after a long figuring it out process, has agreed to hire us a director of operations. That search is in process literally right now today. And so that person is going to take a lot of the organizational, logistical, budgeting, purchasing, acquisitions, all that stuff. So me and that person will be the big two in the program, if you will. In addition to that, we get assistance from our director of bands, who comes and teaches some stuff during leadership camp, who conducts the national anthem at games, but is otherwise relatively uninvolved. And then within the athletics bands program, we have a couple of staff assistants who just cover general things, or on small contracts, but of course, you know, put in way more work than than is expected. And then there's a reasonably large, usually game day only, volunteer staff. So we have 2 photographers, both of whom are alums of the program and are professional photographers now, who donate their time very graciously to us to document the goings on. We have a couple of alums who live up in Portland who are our equipment managers. During rehearsals, our chapter of Kappa Kappa Psi helps move stuff around, set up the podiums, set up the yard line markers, set up the speakers, all that stuff. But on game days, they're in uniform and they need to concentrate on performing. And so we have a couple of alums who come back for game days and do that stuff on game days. Yeah, and then there's a student staff. There's an office assistant who basically runs the office, does a lot of setting up of like students moving into their dorms early for camp, operates homestays during camp, orders like the Subway sandwiches for a lunch during camp, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. That's a tremendous amount of work to run the program.
Yeah, it's something that I'm constantly trying to get people around campus to just see, that the scope of the operation is much larger than you would anticipate, I guess. I'm constantly trying to get administrators to come out to practice, come hang out, come talk to the band, see what we're all about, look at the behind the scenes a little bit.
Now, you have, 5 to 6 football games, depending on the bowl, if you make a bowl or not, correct?
Yeah. So I snicker there only because we've never made a bowl since I've been to Oregon State. That is not out of our realm in the very recent past. We've made a bowl as recently as I think 2013, 2014. But we're not the best football program.
That's okay. Headline screams, band director on podcast claims football team. No.
Exactly. But so actually it's funny. Every year I tell students during camp, I say, hey, listen, if we make a bowl game, we're going. And bowl games are over winter break, and that is going to mess with your plans. And I need you to know that you should be keeping that free until we know for sure that we're not making a bowl game. And then I get up for announcements on the Monday after we are mathematically eliminated. which is usually in mid to late October. And I say, okay, we are officially mathematically eliminated. Even if we win out, we will not make a bowl game. You can go ahead and make winter break plans. And they all laugh at me because they had been making plans the whole time.
You can usually tell pretty quickly in a football season whether the team's...
You can usually tell, yeah. Like there are episodes of teams turning it around one way or the other.
Sure.
Like this last year, Colorado started off really, really hot.
I know,
and then
one of
ended
my
up not
alma
being very
maters.
well. Oh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm a CU
Actually,
Masters.
that was our only Pac-12 win this
yes,
last year.
I'm painfully aware of that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm also a Florida State alumnus, and they were bad last year, too. So, I mean, they're usually reliably good. So
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what to make of any of this.
Yeah, so our schedule is certainly determined by whether or not the team is good, but the morale of the band really isn't. I mean, they're in it to support the students on the field, whether they're winning or not, and it really is intrinsically fun and motivating for them. So I don't want to say it doesn't matter if they win, because it does matter if they win, but it doesn't affect our enrollment, our morale during games. It's not a thing.
So the reason I asked that question, I started to talk about this with the bowl, but what other sports? I mean, I know you do men's basketball. You must do women's basketball. You mentioned soccer. What athletic events are you required to be part of? So
I'm trying to move the band program away from being so athletics event oriented and getting us out into the community a little bit more. So we're trying to find gigs like farmers markets, like the county fairs, trying to find things like that to perform at, because it's crazy to me that we live in a very small town here in Corvallis. It's like 55,000 people, and it's kind of nestled away. Actually, Corvallis is the westernmost town in the lower 48, over 50,000 people, because we are west of Portland and Seattle and whatnot. We're like almost on the coast. We're 40-minute drive.
Really?
Through the hills to the coast. Yeah, it's a thing.
Wow, I have to go look that up now. Okay.
Yeah, because all the coastal cities on the West Coast are in California.
Oh.
Which is, in California, curves east.
Oh, and so Seattle must be farther east than you.
Correct, yeah. Because Seattle is inland. The Olympic Peninsula separates Seattle from the actual ocean, but they're on this. The water there is the Puget Sound. So we're way out here. We're true west, if you will. But it's a small town, and it was crazy to me that we didn't get out there and perform in the community very often. So we're adding a bunch of stuff like that, and I think the students are kind of into it. But yeah, we perform at what you would consider to be the standard band sports, which is football and basketball. In addition, we do volleyball in the fall. That group is the group that we audition, and they do small group performances. That's also the group that ends up going to the NCAA tournament. We have a women's basketball program that's been highly successful the last few years. They've made at least the Sweet 16 every year that I've been here. We made the Final Four 4 years ago. Last year we knocked off Tennessee and Baylor in the NCAA tournament for women's basketball. They're very good, but people on the national stage don't really know that we're really good.
I think women's basketball gets overlooked by a lot of people, though, in general.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So Drumline performs at soccer here. They have Brazilian samba traditional instruments, and they have 5 or 6 grooves in the samba batuca style. Our drumline instructor is a big solo chamber percussion guy, and so he wrote all these grooves, and there's a lead drum. There's a specific name for it. He knows it. I don't. And the beautiful thing about soccer is it goes for a long time with no breaks. And normally that would mean that we can't play at all. Like if we had a band there, like the norm, sort of the what am I thinking of the word? The accepted thing is that you don't play during gameplay. Like that is in the rule book for football and basketball. Like when the ball is live, you can't be playing at all. But for soccer, that's not true. And so what ends up happening is we play for probably 40 minutes of the 90 minutes.
Sure. Well, if you listen to like some of those South American soccer or the soccer match, you can hear those drums going constantly.
Right. It's a part of the culture in the sport. And so Yeah, it ends up being really great. Our team made the NCAA playoffs this year. We hosted our first game. Drumline was at that game. The team came over and grabbed some of our instruments and played with us afterwards after they won. It's a fun little community thing. The stands are really small, and so it's a really intimate sports environment despite the huge field, Yeah, it's fun to watch.
So you're very, very busy and you have a lot kind of on your plate to keep organized. Can you distill any of this as advice to maybe someone who's listening who's a band director out there?
Get really good at Google Sheets. like just get really good at it. We operate everything through Google Drive, Google Sheets, Docs, etc. We use a bunch of specific plugins to automate a lot of stuff that we used to have to do in person. Like, for example, when a student, we've got some plugins that interact with Google Sheets, and the sign up form for band is a Google form. It's very well disguised, but it is a Google form. And what it does is it populates a Google spreadsheet as people fill it out. And then we have plugins and scripts running on that spreadsheet that say, okay, whenever there's a new line, it looks at that line and says, okay, which of these cells are filled in a certain way, and does things that are triggered based on that. So, for example, if a new member has elected to pay the extra to stay in their dorm during camp, students can do home stays with us where we pair them up with an upperclassman who's usually in their section. Sometimes we try and match them up in their major as well to get a sort of mentor thing going. But you don't have to do that. You can move into your dorm early, but the deal is you have to pay for it because it does cost money. If they do that, we ask for their dorm number. The script will recognize that they want to move into their dorm during camp, and it will auto email from my email address campus housing with all that student's information and when they want to move in and all that stuff. Like this fall, we're going to Cal. Students are going to need excuse letters to miss class on Friday. But instead of sending out one that says, oh, the bearer of this email is a member of the blank, we have them fill out a little form that says, what class are you missing? What's your name? What's your email address? What's your professor's email address? And it will, when you fill out that form, it will custom make you a PDF excuse letter from me that says, Dear Professor, this, a student in your microbio 253 or whatever class is on this trip. It's a huge opportunity for them, et cetera, so that I don't have to do it. So like a piece of advice would be automate as much as you can.
How about your concert band that you conduct on campus?
The Wind Symphony is a lot of fun. The Wind Symphony is about half students who performed in very high-level high schools who want to keep going, but don't really have a desire to make the top group and do like world premieres of esoteric music and whatnot, and half music students who are progressing their way towards performing in the wind ensemble, the top group. So our charge is doing about half what you would consider to be traditional classical wind lit, your Grangers, your Holsts, but in addition to that, like your 70s and 80s, your Alfred Reeds, your Claude T. Smiths, etc. And then about half new music that those music ed students are going to encounter and want to be knowledgeable about in their time once they leave the program, once they're out teaching. So about half and half old stuff and new stuff, if you boil it way down, you know what I mean? So we do try and do one or two weird out there pieces that not many people perform per year. But then we also will do like one of the major suites almost every year. Sure.
Now, based on this literature, these aren't seconds. This isn't where the music ed students are playing their seconds.
No, that's campus band. That's the sort of non-audition show up on Tuesday night and play group.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, like we'll do, like we've done the Hearshen Sousa Symphony. We did the Immersion Suite by Alex Shapiro last year. We did like Away Day by Adam Gorb this last year, which is a piece that has been kind of forgotten, but makes me really sad that it's been kind of forgotten. So we'll do stuff like that, but we'll also do, Holst 1.
Can you talk to me about leadership in the Oregon State Band and how you create leaders and what you're doing for that aspect of your program?
Yeah. So I don't like the term servant leadership, although I like the full philosophical underpinnings of that sort of genre of leadership training. The reason I don't like the specific term is because it sounds like the leaders are taking direction from the group that they're leading. And to a certain extent, I think you have to, you know what I mean? But I'm a big sports guy. Have you read the John Wooden leadership book?
I have not. It's on my list and I never do.
So I have mixed feelings on that book. There's he has this pyramid of leadership. Not a big fan of that. A lot of that book ends up sounding like some old dude in the 1960s ranting. Some of it is that, which is valuable sometimes. But one of the things he says in there is that recruitment is not about skill. Recruitment is about character. It's about things that you can't train in 2 hours, 3 times a week. And I find that to be true about leadership also. I think we try and find character in our leaders that we can then say, this reflects what we want to be in the organization. Character to me is an accumulation of your thoughts, your habits, your priorities, who you are outside of what you can do. You know what I mean? Leadership is not necessarily about being the best player in the group, although that's, helpful because you have to lead sectionals and all that stuff. Leadership to me is about being an exemplary person.
So how do we identify the character that we're looking for in our leaders?
So to me, leadership is about making people feel like they have a place where they want to go because they want to be valued. And marching band is already that thing. And the reason I know it's that thing is because students, and I was just talking about this in a presentation up at CBDNA Athletics. Students have an intrinsic value associated in their ethos with marching band. And the reason I know that is because the extrinsic things that they get, the tangibles for being a part of the marching band, is nowhere near what you would have to receive in order to be putting in that amount of time and effort, right? They get a unit in school, they get, a t-shirt or something like that. That is not worth the amount of time that they invest in it. So there's something in marching band that they want to have, that they get. It's a social thing. It's a pride in performance thing. It's a constructing of excellence thing. It's what my dad used to call type 2 fun. Are you familiar with this?
No.
So he used to say that there's type 1 fun and there's type 2 fun. And my dad and that side of my family are big outdoor junkies. We lived in Durango, Colorado for a while when I was a kid because my dad was welding at the Yeti mountain bike factory. This is my background, if you will. Type 1 fun is eating a candy bar. Right. Eating a candy bar is undeniably fun. Some food science person engineered that to be such a perfect experience, right? It's great. It's sugar. It's fun. That's type 1 fun. It doesn't involve any investment on your part. It's an immediate payout and it's over in a second, right? Type 2 fun is winning an audition. Type 2 fun is finishing a marathon. Type 2 fun is something that you've invested in and might not necessarily be fun in the moment, but is extremely rewarding at the end of it. And marching band to me is nothing but type 2 fun. It is something that people want to invest their time in because it gives them some intrinsic sense of having accomplished something. And so when I'm looking at leaders, when I'm looking at leadership, I'm trying to find people who see that in others. I'm trying to find people who are willing to put in the time and effort to make other people's time valuable, right? Because you want students to show up to band and know that their time is going to be well spent, that they're going to be able to invest in themselves, and that they're going to be able to accomplish something at the end of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the way, this is what we do in band, right? We take young people, and especially, I teach 4th graders, And, the sense of accomplishment when they first play Hot Cross Buns or when they play the last song in the first method book, this is that type 2 fun. And so it's almost baked into the activity itself.
Right. It's like my friend Theo, who I go backpacking with a lot and have since we were in high school together. He said something one time about backpacking. He said, it's kind of like you're generically miserable the whole time, but then afterwards you're like, oh, that was great. I want to do that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Because like it's hot on the football field. It sucks to do the same move over and over and over again, but then afterwards you go, yeah, I wouldn't trade that for the world. I would absolutely do that again. Yeah.
And so how do we leverage that? How do we bottle that to our benefit as band directors?
Right. So the thing that I encourage my leaders to keep in mind is that everyone has goals, right? If someone is being disruptive in your sectional, you have to call them out. Because otherwise you will lose the respect of everybody else. And you don't have to be a jerk. And you don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to say, you're doing this and I don't want you to do this. But you make it about them. Everybody has goals. You define the role of each person towards achieving whatever their vision is, and then hold everyone accountable for their job towards achieving that vision, right? Because a thing that I can't stress enough to leaders is that high achievers don't get along well with people who are okay with mediocrity, and people who are okay with mediocrity don't like high achievers. And if you let those things coexist in your organization, then you'll never have any sort of interpersonal chemistry. There's all kinds of stuff like that I truly believe in trying to instill in our leaders. And it's, I see my job as developing the people who are going to then develop the musicians. And it's a hard thing, right? Because so 2 things. One, keeping a standard to me is independent of success, right? We just had a great season this last year. Honestly, one of the best seasons of my career. But that is not the definition of what the standard is. The success comes from keeping that standard. It doesn't mean that in the fall we are going to be good because we were good last year, right? One of the things that we tell our students is that you are not a high-level performer because you are a member of this band. This band is a high-level performing group because of the efforts of the people inside of it, right? You're not automatically great because you're in the Oregon State Marching Band. The Oregon State Marching Band is great because people are exerting effort all the time towards trying to achieve something, right? And organizations can't ever improve without the friction of challenge, right? Understanding that from the outset, I think, is important because it avoids the frustration in the face of the inevitable, right?
That's a really interesting point about that excellence thing. A lot of people ask about recruiting numbers and how do I talk to these middle school band directors or high school band directors with huge numbers, and the question comes up, how do you build that? And it always comes down to that excellence and portraying either community or building excellence. Those are the 2 things.
Right. And they are somewhat entwined, but you have to, I think, and again, I tell this to our section leaders, you have to pick the one that you think is more important. And to me, the standard is more important than the success. We could work all day on getting a specific move right and perform it very well, and that would be a success. But if we had been keeping up a standard of we march a certain way, we present ourselves a certain way, we have a certain discipline towards our vision, then we wouldn't have to have worked so hard to get that thing right. The success is a result of the standard.
Yeah, I think it also changes, it evolves as students get older, because we know early on, especially like when we go through like the middle school, high school years, it's being part of something bigger than themselves. And,
right.
But as they get farther along in their age, it becomes more about being great. I know that was what it was for me. When I was in band and as a freshman in high school, it was about being in band. When I was in band as a senior in high school, it was about being as good as I could be in band.
Yeah. And there's in music in particular, there's a certain tipping point that is hard to pinpoint. I think it's very fuzzy. It happens for most people in high school, for some people in college, where music stops being something that they do because someone else is telling them to do it and starts being something that they do because they want to do it. Because like So someone once told me that to be good at something, you have to be bad at it for a long time. You have to be bad at it for a long time. And so what is going to motivate you through being bad at it? Is it just the goal of being good? Well, no, not really, because you don't know what that feels like yet. You know what I mean? Like, I know what it feels like to like play the offstage horn solo in Mahler 2. I know what that feels like because I'm good enough to get hired to do it. But I didn't know that feeling when I was learning French horn in the middle school, right? So like someone was pulling me along, pulling me up a hill until I got to the point where it became self-fulfilling, and then playing was fun, and then I played more because it was fun, and then I got better because I played more, and that downhill is a lot easier, right? So like there's a point there where students become independent musicians, I guess is the term we use for it. And getting people there is really hard.
So, Olin, how about, I know that you also compose. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I was, like I said, in my undergrad, I was on a track to finish with a composition degree, ended up getting derailed because of money stuff. But I sort of do it in my, I don't want to say in my spare time, because it's not really spare time. It's something I find very fulfilling. But I'll write stuff whenever I can. I've got a new piece coming out this fall, had 2 premieres last year, but it's usually 1 or 2 pieces a year, and it's not something that I consider to be like sustaining, but I do consider it to be a part of my career. I think it's something that I have to offer the community. And so if people like stuff, they can play it. If they don't have to, you know. It's something that I mostly just do for me.
Mm-hmm, sure. How much are you writing a year?
Yeah. 2 or 3 pieces, depending on the year. 2018 was a 3-piece year. This year so far it's been 1, but you know, who knows the way it's going to go. It also depends on the piece. Like I had a piece premiered last spring that was like an 18-minute long 2-movement, very symphonic, heavy, very technical work. But then this last fall, a piece that I premiered, which is probably my favorite piece that I've written, is like 5 minutes long, grade 4.5 or 5 or something like that. And it's just kind of a ripper just for fun. And I like it a lot. It's gotten a lot of honor band play. But mostly I don't write to put stuff out. I write when I have an idea that I want to put on paper.
What about, have you had any composers in that you've commissioned as the conductor of a group?
I never have. Nope. I've been on the marching band side for my whole career. And we do all of our arranging in-house. So either I or someone I trust will arrange everything that we do on the field. And part of that is so that I have this idea, concept that I don't think that if you want to be a college band that has its own sound that people go, oh, that's that band, without knowing that it's that band, then you kind of can't be playing the same stock arrangements that everyone else is playing, which is not to say that stock arrangements are bad. There's a lot of really good ones out there, but like if you're playing the same, like You Can Call Me Al or whatever that everyone else is playing, then it doesn't set you apart in any sort of way. And so we try and arrange everything in-house. We do get licensing for everything that we do, which ends up being a lot more expensive. But I think it's worth it so that we can cultivate a specific sound of ours. So most of my work in Finale is actually not composing, it's arranging for marching band. That's
really interesting because, you know, this is something that actually I think we can talk about. I know that licensing is a big controversial thing on the Facebook band directors group. So I don't know if you want to dig into that a little bit or not.
No, that's fine. I don't know if it's so much controversial as something that we didn't have to grapple with. I mean, we always should have been grappling with it, but I don't think it's something that as a profession we decided we cared about until about 10 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, there were a bunch of high-profile lawsuits with specific college marching bands, and then everyone went, oh, shoot. You know, I guess we kind of do have to license this stuff. And I think that unsurprisingly coincided with the rise of YouTube, where publishing houses and rights holders could suddenly figure out. It's not that we were doing it legally before. It's that if you weren't in the stadium, you didn't get caught, right? And so there was a lot of sort of people being upset about having to license stuff, which always struck me as a little weird, maybe because I joined the profession post the introduction of YouTube, like just barely, right? But like that's always the world that I've lived in, and so it doesn't surprise me that people who write music would want to get paid when people use it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that doesn't seem surprising or shocking to me at all, but maybe it's just being in that younger generation, I kind of expected it.
Yeah, I mean, we composers write their music, and we need to pay for what we use. I mean, that's just like anything else, right?
Right. Now, there's a certain, like, I have a sort of philosophical objection to like music rentals, for example. Like it bothers me that if we want to pay a composer to perform a piece, it shouldn't be for that performance. It should be for the physical music. And like that's like part of the reason that a program like the program that I went to high school with, who didn't have a lot of money, was able to be successful is because they had built up this library over time. And if they wanted to perform The Hounds of Spring, they had bought it back in the 80s and didn't have to rebuy it again. And it strikes me that rentals for certain pieces, certain large scale things that are events makes a reasonable amount of sense to me. But for sort of your everyday pieces, it strikes me that it's counter to the education mission.
Well, this is interesting. I'm not going to name drop for a minute here. I had a conversation with Robert W. Smith about this, and we talked about this idea that if we're not paying our composers, if we're circumventing, if we're copying, if we're not doing the copyright, then people are going to stop composing, and the model's going to go to a rental if we're not careful. We can almost bite the hand that feeds us.
Yeah, and I'm all for that. I just think that if you pay for a piece, then a part of that should be for the program. If the program buys a piece of music, it strikes me that it should be valuable in perpetuity, especially as things get recycled and stuff gets new stuff is being composed all the time. And I think if you wanted to go, like when I was student teaching, one of the things that really stuck with me was my master teacher's emphasis on sight reading. She had put together this like binder for every single student in the class of music that was in the library at her school. And it was like 75 pieces. And you had the Alto 1 book, if you will. And it was never performed in a concert hall. It was never performed outside of that class, but it was today's sight reading is this piece of actual music with value and melodic phrasing and not just an etude. You know what I mean? And so like the sight reading was functional musically in addition to being, you know, notes and rhythms that they hadn't seen before. And they wouldn't have been able to put that together if the program didn't have a library that was pre-existing and, you know, evergreen.
All right, Olin. So before we get on to my lightning round or molasses round,
sure.
however we want to call it, let's take one more look at AMusEd, the podcast.
Sure.
What have you learned professionally from doing that?
Professionally, I have learned that everybody is struggling in some way with their career. Everyone has something that they wish they were better at. Everyone has an insecurity about thinking, you know, oh, I wish I was better at this specific thing. And if we expect everyone to be perfect all the time, then all that does is force people to hide their insecurities and just sort of fake like they're good at everything and put on this face and never actually have the room to grow professionally. That's been a big one for me.
Yeah, that's what your guys' show does the best, is kind of create that sense of community around it.
Yeah, and part of the show is we, right at the top of every show, we cop to a mistake that we made that week. We did something wrong, and it's not in saying, Like I was like, it's not a confessional. It's not, I was bad.
Right.
It's nobody's perfect. We're all working through this. I did this thing that I wish I had done better. Like I missed a deadline on a grade or something like that. Or I, in rehearsal, maybe got frustrated with a student who was just trying to do their best. It's something like that. And it's not to say that I'm bad because of it. It's to say that we're all trying to constantly improve. And so to pretend like we've arrived, to pretend like we're excellent is counterproductive.
Olin, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
The line for me between healthy and unhealthy competition is where it serves the student in their development. If a student is involved in competition so much that becomes the only thing that music is valuable for, then I think it loses a little bit of the aesthetic value that we're attempting to instill in students. We're attempting to create artists who then, when they go on into their technical careers, have this out-of-the-box vision and creative thinking that then makes the world a better place. And if music is only about competition, then we lose that sort of creative value for the world. You know what I mean? It strips it of its aesthetics and is about perfection in a certain way.
So how do you find a work-life balance in your career as a music teacher?
Yeah, that's a hard one, man.
It sounds like it. Our conversation has led me to believe that you work very hard.
Well, yeah. And so like a difficult thing for me is the composing thing is something that I don't see as part of my career. I see it as something that I do for me when I want to do it, when I have something to say musically, but it's still career associated, right? Because high schools play that music and colleges play that music. And these are people who I relate to on a professional level. And so like that has been a really hard line to draw for me. But also I'm an outdoor person. That actually, as we record this, when this gets released, I am going to be out in the middle of Montana outside of cell phone range for like a month, just to not be around anything. So I try and make lines like that.
And so if something happens to the Oregon State Band, what's going to happen?
So it's kind of weird. We usually close for the month of July so that everyone can take some, much deserved downtime. But this year we happen to be in a transition. We happen to be hiring a new ops director right now. I'm not the chair of the search committee for that. So the potential for like that hire will be made, and then that start date is in August when I'm back. We're in the transition in between director of bands right now, plus our undergraduate office assistant just graduated and has a teaching job in Myrtle Point, Oregon. We're very happy for him. But what that means is this particular year, everything is actually down. Like no one's around. So I just sent out a big mailer to last year's band and this incoming class of students with all the information on it. We send one big mailer out every month over the summer. And so they're all up to date on information. All the information on the website is correct. All the dates are correct. So hopefully people don't have questions. But, that's kind of the way it is. Nothing catastrophic can happen while I'm gone. I've made sure to communicate with all of our athletics people. Like they have our credentials request for the fall. We've got a bunch of our equipment ordered already. The arrangers are off and running. I've finished arranging one of the shows that I'm arranging. So we're a little bit of ahead of the game. So hopefully everything's in a good place. But that was definitely something that we've been thinking about.
So, Olin, from your point of view, what are the challenges facing music education and how can we best meet them?
I think we are a very old profession, and a thing that I wonder about is not necessarily that I have so I'm going to say something right now and it's going to come across very like the vibe of what I'm going to say is very like kids these days with their hair and their rock and roll music. Like that's going to be the vibe, but that's not at all what I mean.
We're all judging you.
Totally. Excellent. I'm not sure that integrating technology as much as we seem to be wanting to is as good of an idea as we think it is.
That's interesting.
I'm not positive. It could be, but I wonder if we're rushing into it instead of analyzing how it can help.
In what ways?
Like, okay, so for example, John on the podcast is at a one-to-one iPad school. This is like a thing. And part of that is like schools are very quick to embrace technology, right? Certain technologies, I think, really could help a lot. I don't think we can imagine running the band world without, for example, tuners, whereas like tuners didn't necessarily exist 100 years ago when our profession was started, and certainly not before that in the orchestral world. But at John's one-to-one iPad school, it was expected that all the classes utilized that technology somehow. And so he integrated, because at his school, there's no middle school program in that district. So he starts beginners in the 9th grade. And so he started operating through smart music, did smart music associated things, did a lot of grading through that. And what ended up happening is he ended up with musicians who had a very, if the bar is get the notes to turn green in smart music, then that is what they will target for their learning. You know what I mean? And so it ended up being a situation where they had trouble with expression or vibrato or phrasing or breath control, because if they hit the right frequency at the right time, then smart music said that's good. Right. And so like, I think there's probably a use for that, but it might not be everything that people hope for it to be.
All right, Olin. So if I could give you a time machine and we could set it to the day of your high school graduation, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, I mean, other than the obvious, hey, music is more important to you than you think it is right now thing, and you may love physics and math, but that might not be a career for you. I would probably have encouraged myself to go straight to music and avoid that whole like trying to refigure stuff out. But then there's a part of me that says I needed to figure that out in that order in order to arrive at a place where I felt comfortable pursuing the career that I now pursue, right? What I would say is to my high school self is that something that I preach to our leadership and our students now, which is you have to live with some sort of discomfort in your life, whether it be the discomfort of discipline. Discipline is something that I find to be very challenging. I find it to be something that is hard to implement in your own life, but is important. I find it to be uncomfortable to do the thing that you have to do in the way that it's supposed to be done when it's supposed to be done. You know what I mean? I find it annoying to wake up in the morning to practice piano, but I know that through that discipline, I will achieve certain things. And I know that I will either live with the life discomfort of having to wake up at 7 and play piano every day, or I will live with the life discomfort of knowing that I didn't achieve the potential that I could have if I had done that, right? So it's one or the other, and you have to make that choice, and everybody makes that choice. And so knowing that that's a conscious choice rather than the default is to not do stuff, I think that would have been very valuable to me.
If you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct, and why?
I think I will rephrase this to be a little less last meal inflected, and a little more like what piece do you find very musically satisfying? To me, my favorite piece of wind band music is the second movement of the Hearshen Sousa Symphony. I find it to be an extra, and part of it's I'm a composer, and so I find it really interesting. But I find the manipulation of that 1 6-note phrase to be just astounding, musically, aesthetically. I find it to be in really interesting ranges. I think like I would never have thought for a piccolo to hold a high E for like 20 bars. Because it's freaking hard, right? But it fits together towards the end of that, or towards the middle of that piece, in a way that I find just revelatory. And they aren't decisions that I would have made if I was writing that piece. But I think that's why I find it so interesting. I find that piece to be very satisfying.
All right, Olin, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
No. I should make a website for my music one of these days. But all of my efforts are on the students in the Oregon State Marching Band. Right now, it's all focused on trying to make their experience the best it can be, trying to utilize their time in a way that they find valuable, so that their experience is what I want it to be.
So how can people get in touch with you?
So they can email me at olinhannum@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook, but I don't really post very much. I'm on Instagram, but I don't think I've literally posted ever. I'm on Twitter, and I have posted exactly once. I'm not a very internet friendly person. Or if you live somewhere between Helena, Montana, and Salida, Colorado, I will be riding my bike through your town in the next month or so.
Okay, perfect.
Well, cool.